Okay, good morning. We are in Yoreh Deah. We are starting Kaf Dalet. Dine, Drasa, Chalada, Hagrama, Ve'ikor. So we finished Shia, and these are the 5 things that are halacha l'Moshe Misinai that make a shchita psula, and basically a nevela. Okay. In cases that are for sure you violated one of them, so it's a mamash nevela, and with all the dinei tuma and tara. And in cases, there's a few cases. If you look up each case in the Gemara, some of them are ibay de lo ifshita and ramachmir, and most of the cases are straightforward, but it depends. And so those are obviously will only be a suffix nevela and 100% asr. Okay, Aleph. Drasa. What is drasa? That's when you, a hacking motion, when you slice down hard with pressure as opposed to back and forth relaxed slicing. But you always have to use some pressure. If you just go back and forth with zero pressure, nothing cuts. Obviously, if it's very sharp, you need very little pressure. But again, we learned it has to be completely smooth. In order to be kosher, shchita, it does not have to be completely sharp, whatever that is. Okay. Ketzad. Kigon sheniach hasakin al hatzavar v'dachak v'chatach lamata kechotech tznon or kishot. All right. So basically, drasa is when you put the knife over the neck, and instead of going backwards and forwards, a sliding motion, you just go straight down with pressure, the same way someone chops radishes or cucumbers or some kind of gourd or whatever.
Even if it is somewhat horizontal,
So if it's hareze psula, so if you go a hacking motion, a chopping motion, that's psula. Ve'ein sari chlomar im, and also if you go side to side but with too much pressure, that's also a problem. Ve'ein sari chlomar im hika besakin al hatzavar kederach shemakin besayif vechatach asimanim bevat achad. Right, so certainly if you just go straight to the neck and you hack it and you cut off the whole neck, then of course you're going to be a problem. Okay, so that's drasa. Bet. Shachat beholacha o bahalhova alavad. You just go only one way direction. We pretty much learned this before, but when we discussed the laws of the sakin, the knife itself. Anyway, so you go in one direction only. If the knife is long enough that it's the width of 2 necks, right? We discussed centimeters last time. So it has to be at least 2 full necks. Kemale tzavar, that's what it means. Haga, ima orva mafreket, including the vertebrae, the spine, and the skin. Kshera, if the knife is long enough, it's 100% kosher. V'im lav, psula. But if it's not double the neck and you only went in one direction, which is not the way you're generally supposed to do shchita, you go back and forth. But, okay, at least that's what we do. V'im lav, psula. But if it's not long enough, then it's a psula. Shekol she'ein bo kashir, as if it's not at least 2 lengths. Right? If it's a very short knife and you don't go backwards and forwards, you're going only in one direction, we assume the only way you're able to cut through enough of the neck to go through 2 simanim is if you put some pressure, unnecessary pressure, which would turn it into a nevela, and lamaisa, usually a suffix nevela. Okay. V'im holich vehevi afilu shachat bizemel kol shehu, and if you have a little tiny knife, very, very, very short, then as long as you're going backwards and forwards and you're not putting too much pressure, then it's kshera. Right? Lechatchila, we don't do that. Hagav v'yesh machmirin v'behema v'amina gvilas elu lifsol v'behema afilu holich vehevi im ein besakin kamale tzavar v'chutz latzavar mashehu. So it must be lahalacha. Rama writes even b'di'evet. You must go backwards and forwards, and you must go with backwards. But the evid psul is if it's not long enough. It has to be at least long enough. Even if you go backwards and forwards, the knife must be long enough, similar to our knives that we use.
That's what the thing, right?
And It's even for behema, but shnei tzevarim is for both. And for a chicken, it's very, very small. Okay, Gimel. It's very easy to be long enough. Twice the neck of a chicken. Gimel. Shachat shnei rashim ke'echad, beholacha o behova bilbad. Okay, so now this is mi'ikar adin, right? Not what we do, but if you want to cut two necks, two animals at one time, I don't know, you want to do it as for a show. You want to show how wonderful of a shochet you are. So you take two necks, two animals, you line them up, one right next to each other. So your knife has to be, for each neck, it has to be at least double. So since they're lined up to each other, as long as it's, we'll read it inside, if the knife is long enough for three necks, it'll be kshera, and if not, then both animals, we say, are nevela and asar. Okay. Dalid. Shnayim ochazim b'sakin. You have two guys are cutting together with one knife. V'shochtin afilu zelamala letzad harosh, v'zelamata letzad hachazeh. Even one's a little higher than the other. Shochazin oto be'alachson. They're holding it at an angle. Kshera, it's kosher. V'lo chayshinan shama yidrisu zeh al zeh. So I've never seen this done. But you can have, anyways, it's not, we don't worry about drasa. Okay. Who makes the bracha? Good question. Okay. Okay, let's go on. Hey. Haya shochet v'chatach kol ha'mafrechet kshera. So the Shulchan Aruch writes, if you shecht, you cut through the simanim, and then you go through the vertebrae, you go through the whole neck, it's kshera. It's still kosher because you went through the simanim first, and it wasn't, and you did it a normal slicing motion, not too much pressure. V'aminhag v'hatrif, and the Rama writes, and the minhag is to say it's a treif or an avela. Afilu lo chatach rak rova mafreket. Even if you only went through rov, which is generally considered if you went through the spine or not, right? Ve'ein l'shanot, and do not change the minhag. Ki yesh merabuta sovrim kain, because many hold that once you go through most of the vertebrae, or you go through the spine, then we say we're afraid you put too much pressure and it's a treifa. Now the Shach points out v'tzarech iyun because many poskim are matir like the Shulchan Aruch. And he writes, maybe the Rama is only talking about a case when there's not a hefsid meruba. And then one should be machmer. Okay. Vav. Keshe adam shochet of v'yochez b'simanim b'shtei etzveotav tzarich she'yochaz otam yafeh. When holding the simanim, when you're shechting for an oaf, so then you have to hold them carefully. She'im eino ochez otam betov, if you don't hold them well, Pamim shiyu nishmatim lakanu lakan, they can easily move from one area to another, move side to side. V'leichol yishchotan al yedei holacha ve'yavo lijei drasa. And it's going to be difficult to just to slice it as it keeps moving, and then you're going to end up putting too much pressure in order to make it work. So that's why it's very important to, what we do is we just hold the back of the skin of the neck, and that'll hold it tight. Haga, v'chen lo yaniach ha'etzba al hasakin, ela yachzik oto bekata kedei shelo yavo lidei drasa. Also, when you hold the knife, you have to only hold it by the handle, and not have any of your fingers. Some people they use like the index finger, not index finger, right? And they hold it over the back of the knife in order to give it some pressure or stability. But you can't do that. They have to only hold the handle, and don't put any extra pressure on the blade with your fingers. And if you do a drasa, even with a mashahu of the esophagus, it's a psula, right? De'araisa. Haga, v'haminhag lahatrif kol drasa bein b'miut kama, bein b'miut basra, bein b'kaneh, bein b'veshet. And this we're going to see a lot. The Rama writes, and the minhag is, we say it's 100% treif. If you do drasa anywhere, it doesn't matter if it's in the beginning, or the end. Because at the end is because you already finished the shechita. It's already a kosher shechita, but you're still going with it. So then we're machmer to say even at the very end, and it doesn't matter both bekana, both beveshet. We're going to see this again. Because the veshet, we understand that's simple. Because if it's a hole in a veshet, it could be a treifa anywhere on one little point. By a kana, on most of the length of the kana, as long as you don't have a cut or a hole through most of the, should we say diameter? Most of the way through, so then, as long as it's less than the most, it's still not an avela, and you can still finish off and do a kosher shchita. That's midin Torah. But the Rama writes, the minhag is to be matrif for either one of the simanim, and including for chickens as well, even though you only need to get one. Okay. And that we're going to see by all the items. Zayin. Chalada. Okay. What is chalada? It's when you have a part of the expression comes from a chulda, that just it's a little rodent that can just bury itself into the ground or underneath things, and so that's the expression of you have to have the knife when it cuts through, it has to go straight through from the neck. You see visibility without it getting tucked under, burying through under the skin, under another siman or whatever. So that's what chalada is. Ketzad. Kegon shehichnis hasakin bein siman lesiman. Let's say as you are cutting, I'm not quite sure how this happens, but as you're cutting, you can get the knife in between the two simanim. Right? If that were to happen, it slips in there, and especially in those days when originally, again, remember, Shia, there's a time for Shia. You have a number of seconds. Again, we don't hold of any of we say Shia is basically even a mashahu, in the beginning and the end. So many of these cases are, most of the siman is not lamaisa. As far as all these individual cases where we're still meko for, that's only in the din of Gemara, but not halacha lamaisa. So anyway, so over here, you get the knife in between the two simanim. Bein sheshachat tachton kehilchato milamala lamata. Whether you're going v'chazer v'hotzi v'shachat elyon. So basically, it depends how you're holding the animal. But let's say you have the animal lying down on its back, and now you get the knife in between the two simanim, and you want to cut, let's say, upward or downward. It doesn't really matter which direction you want to go. And then after you slice one, then you're going to go back and cut the other one. Then you get the one that it was, right, because the knife was tucked underneath one of them. Let's say underneath the kana. And now you take it out, you already shachted the veshet, now you want to cut the kana. But whether it goes in either direction, whether it's siman, it doesn't make a difference. Psula. All these cases, because the knife was underneath one of these simanim. Again, if the knife is tucked underneath one of the simanim, and you cut because technically you could cut in either direction, but the problem is you can't have the knife tucked underneath one of the simanim as you cut upward. Or if it would be underneath the skin, like you pierce a small hole, you get your knife to go through underneath it. Any one of these cases is chalada, one of the 5 things that are halacha l'mashum that make the shchita psula. Okay. Chet. Hechlida sakin tachat haor. You get it underneath the skin. O tachat semer misuvach b'tzavara behema. O tachat matli takashur b'tzavara. O shehamatli medubak bo b'shava. So again, we mentioned you can't have chalada of the sakin going underneath the skin. Also a problem if it gets underneath hair or the wool. If it gets tucked underneath by the neck of the animal. Also, if you have some kind of cloth bandage, any kind of a bandage, handkerchief, anything like that tied around the neck or stuck to the neck. Nowadays we have all kinds of glue, but here it's wax. Anything that's tied or attached to the animal, the din is v'shachat shchitato psula. If you shecht with any of this, and the knife gets underneath one of these objects as it cuts through the sakin. So again, when you're looking at the neck, you can't see directly the sakin touching the simanim because it's underneath one of these items. So the din is it's a psula. Shach points out that's also why you can also, okay, and we'll get that in a moment, never mind. Okay. Aval im hamatlit parush al tzavara. But if the matlit is just loose, it's not attached, or if a person's tie gets in the way and it falls forward, obviously you don't want your tie in the way, it's kind of annoying, but if the tie does get in between your eyes and the knife, again, b'diavad it's not a problem. Shchitato kshera. V'yesh mi sheposel gam bazeh, u'lechatchila yesh lachush lidvarav. So if it's a loose article, l'chadchila, one should be machmer, so take off your knife or make sure it's tucked underneath, well underneath your coat or your shirt. Haga, v'chen yesh lizar b'kavasim sheyesh lehem tzemer misubach v'tzavereim, litlosh at tzemer ha-misubach shelo yavo lidei chalada. So it's common to shave off or remove the hair by the sheep, if you're going to be worried about chalada. And the same thing, sometimes we remove, the Shach says, the Mordechai says, one should also remove the feathers by the neck of a bird. Okay. The Shach learns that according to the Mechaber, even b'di'evid, it would be pasel. That's going on the first case. Shchitato psula. Right. Even b'di'evid, shchitato psula, that's in the case when it's attached. That's when it's attached. Okay, so we basically said that.
The shaving of the hair of the neck more than after to make sure that none of the hairs over the knife and the road?
I don't know. But wherever I don't know exactly. We'll try and find out exactly how much they remove and where.
And is a problem with plucking feathers because there's blood?
There's a problem if it bleeds. So then you'd have to check it. Okay, tet. Only if it bleeds. Tzarich lizayar kesha'adam. Right, so you check the veshet to make sure that there was no punctures. Tet. Tzarich lizayar kesha'adam shochet v'chas al ha'or shelo yaseh bo kera gadol v'shochet berosh hasakin u'mitkaseh me'or. So you have to be careful. Some person might not want to cut so much of the skin or the hide, whatever it is, so therefore he only wants to use the edge of his knife. But that's not okay. So that's not allowed because it can lead to chalada. And once you're cutting from the middle of the knife, that's also why it's important to have a long knife and going back and forth motion. If you're just cutting in the middle of the neck with the middle of the knife, you don't have to worry about chalada. That's not going to happen. You wrote that the edge of your knife is not going to get tucked underneath the animal. The skin. Because where the knife is cutting the simanim, it's not going to get covered up. Some are machmer by this. Okay. Yud. After you cut already most of the simanim, and then there's a little bit left, right? So midaraisa we know 100% the shchita is done, and you already went through rov. It's a kosher animal, it's a kshera, but you're still cutting, and you have a little bit left, or one of them is a little bit left, and then you pasko mutter, and you stop. V'yesh mi she'omer she'oser gam b'zev v'ra'ui lachush lidvarav. But if you had at the last third or last 49%, it did get tucked under, so then it should be aser lechatchila. We should be careful to, right. Lechatchila, one should aser this as well. And the Haggah says clearly, v'aminag lahatrif kol chalada, any case of chalada, bein b'miut kama, bein b'miut basra, bein b'kana, bein b'veshet. Again, anywhere, any one of the 100% of you cutting, anywhere, makes no difference, anytime. It doesn't matter if it's one siman, two simanim, birds, it doesn't matter. It's, okay, we call it an avela, and that's it. Right. Okay. Yud Aleph. This is one of the cases with the miut batra of the Bayad Leib Shita and the Gemara, but okay, we're a machmer. Yud Aleph. Im hechlida sakin tachat miut harishon v'shachtu mimata lamala v'achar kach gamar shchita kedarka. Here you did shchita, and chalada happened in the beginning. V'chen im shachat rov siman echad v'behema v'hechlida sakin tachat miut hanishar. You finished one siman and then you had chalada before or with the beginning of the second siman. V'shachat siman sheni, and then you finished off the second one. V'chein im shachat miut harishon b'chalada, or you did the beginning of the siman. You did the very beginning of the first half. You did it with chalada. V'gamar shchita shelo b'chalada. But you went over the kosher part. You made 50 at the 51 to 51%. When you shechted it, it was done correctly without chalada. Harei zeh psula, doesn't matter. It's since before 51% you did chalada. It's a nevela daraisa 100%, not a safek. Okay, you'd bet. Sorry, but anyways, again, we learned chalada applies anywhere. Let's see. Let's do, maybe we'll start this one. Let's do Hagrama. You'd bet. Hagrama, this is if you do out of place. Hagrama, the exact lashon is a little bit difficult to understand, but it means it was out of place, or you tilted it or moved the knife to cut out of place. That's what Hagrama means. Ketzad. What's an example? We basically learned this already. We learned where the regular place to cut is already on the neck. We did that recently in a previous siman. And here, so you cut too high from this place, or too low. Or you start off shechting in the right place. V'shachat me'at, and you only accomplished a little bit. You didn't do rov siman yet. V'hita sakin, and then you tilt and move the sakin, which is exactly what Hagrama is. Chutz l'makom hashchita, outside of the proper place. Lamala, too high. V'gamra, and you finished it off over there. Aval, im shachat rov chalala kana b'makom shchita. But if you did most of the kana correctly, v'hita sakin chutz l'makom shchita, and then you finished off the last minority of the kana, outside of its place, lamala, the gamar sham, and you finish it there, chatichat kol kana, the rest of the kana, kshera, because we learned you did the most of the kana correctly, and kana only becomes a treifa or a problem if it's more than half, if it was already cut more than half. Okay, less than half, it doesn't affect it. V'hu adin im shachat rov shnayim b'mehei b'makom shchita, same thing. If you do most of two simanim by a behema properly, but then the last third, the very end, v'hishli mashchita behagrama, then you do it out of place, in the wrong place. Oh, bidrasa, or you do a drasa there. Kshera, it's okay. Right, this is the mikar din from the Shulchan Aruch. V'yesh mishaposel bidrasa, but some say dafka bidrasa we're more machmer, even for the last third, or the last minority. V'yesh lachush dvarav lechatchila. And one should very hard to be machmer lechatchila. Haga, again, v'haminhag lahatrif bein bedrasa, bein behagrama, bein b'miut kama, bein b'miut basra, bein b'kana, bein b'veshet. All these things, anywhere along the way of the shchita, if it's a little bit out of place, then it is no good. Okay, Yud Gimel. Higrim b'kana b'tchila shlish v'shachat shnei shlish kshera. If you did a grama on the first third of the kana, we basically said this, and then you shach the last 2/3 correctly, then it's fine. Shachat shlish, but the opposite of v'higrim, you did a grama on the first third, shlish v'chazer v'shachat v'shlish ha'achron kshera, going back and forth, then it's okay. 1 second. Shachat shlish v'higrim, shlish v'chazer v'shachat shlish ha'achron.
Even though that which got you to row was the Hagrama, but since
Right.
row of the cutting.
Right, exactly. You add the two that were done together, the first and the last third. It's could be mitzdarif, the first third and the last third, exactly. Kshera.
And it's not a shahid.
Right, because you did it in less than 15 seconds, let's say, for a normal animal, whatever that number is.
So any
It doesn't.
as long as you're outside, so you tilt the knife and back out.
Right, so it depends how you define that middle part. Okay. Higrim shlish v'shachat shlish v'chazer v'higrim shlish achron harei ze psula. No, wait a second. You know what?
Did you have to go early?
Yeah, that's fine. Higrim shlish, v'shachat shlish, v'chazer v'higrim shlish. Right, there's 2/3 are done b'hagrama. Exactly. V'im dara sahichlit bein b'shlish rishon bein b'shlish emtzai harei ze psula. But drasa and chalada, you can't add the beginning and the third. Same with ikor. These things you can't add that, only b'hagrama. All right.